Hello everyone, it's Louise from Eleanor Grace again. I just was thinking of doing a little video on French knots for you. This is a stitch I use quite a lot. If you've seen my other video on feather stitch, you'll know that I use French knots quite a lot to intersperse with feather stitch, and I will show you that in a minute. This is a little sampler I've made myself, which again, like my practice piece, is just a piece of felt attached to a bit of calico or just a cotton or something plain that you can find to practice on. With French knots, a bit like the other stitches, you can do it with something thin like embroidery thread, which is here and here. Cotton Perlé 8 is my favourite, and you will hear me talk about that again and again. I've got a variegated one here which looks really spectacular. I'll show you something on that in a bit, and another one here. I've also done some here and here in wool, that is more difficult. The thicker the thread is, the more difficult it is to go through, so that's something to bear in mind. So I'd start off with something thinner like cotton perlé, or even sort of 2 to 4 strands of embroidery floss. And as I said, this is part of a bigger sampler that I use for my workshops. As you can see, I've got a lot of different stitches here that I teach on a beginner's class, and I do virtual workshops which will be coming shortly. So if you're interested in that, do please have a look at the link in the comment section here to my group, which is on Facebook, and it's called Slow Stitching by Hand with Eleanor Grace. And you will be able to pick up information about where to get sort of further classes on this. So we're going to have a look at some examples, as I said. Now my cat Ella is just over here, so I'm hoping she's not going to make a dramatic entrance. She just came up onto the table at the end of my last piece, so just managed to miss out. But she's in one of those old cat moods today where she wants to just do what she wants to do. So this was my feather stitch from the last video, which hopefully you've seen. And to show you some examples of where I've combined feather stitch and French knots, I have this piece, which is one of my most recent ones. So you can see here I've done some feather stitch overlaying this fabric and this other piece of fabric and this bit of ribbon. So I've layered up, and then I've stitched over the top with a feather stitch and interspersed with, well, lots of French knots. As you can see, I've used them here as well, and I do love them. I once I get started on them, I get rather overexcited, as you can see, and go a little bit mad. But they do look really effective. They do look really lovely, and they particularly, I like the combination with feather stitch because it does look to me like a reed or a sort of flower stalk with buds at the end. So I'll show you some more because it's something I use quite a lot, as you can see here. This is again some feather stitch with some buds in different colours of French knots. I've also used the French knots here, where I followed the fabric. So the fabric led me in a particular direction, and that was to do sort of some areas of where, you know, there was a different colour or something was particularly vibrant. I did that picked that out in a French knot. And down here I've used the variegated, which comes out really beautifully because it looks like you're changing colour every 5 minutes, but it's not. It's all of these shades of sort of soft pink and salmon pink down here and up here. That just makes it look like you're changing threads every few minutes. Also, to show you again the use here with the French knots and some French knots here. I do think they're really you know, really useful stitches to learn, but they can be a bit fiddly. Again, I've got some here, and again some feather stitch here with some French knots interspersing. So it is something I use a lot. I do also use them to attach pieces together. Now with my particular type of slow stitching, I'm a sort of appliquing piece onto a base layer, and you want the pieces to be joined onto each other. So in this case, I've got a piece of old lace which I've sort of appliqued on with the French knots. It can be a really useful stitch to keep two pieces next to each other, or applique something on. So that's those. And what we're going to do is have a little look at doing a French knot now. So I'm going to use the sort of similar sort of tactic that I did before, which is with going alongside a feather stitch. So I've knotted the end of my piece here. Now my technique for doing French knots, again, as I say, probably with something like cotton perlé is the easiest, cotton perlé 8, is to keep my needle as flat and as sort of down to the fabric and horizontal as possible, just sort of maybe raising it up a little bit to be able to start wrapping. Now I know technically I think 3 is supposed to be the number that you're wrapping around, but I do anything from 3 to 5 depending on the thickness of the thread. With the yarn ones I showed you earlier, that was I think only 2 or 3. So I'm going to pull this back and go back in the same stitch. I will show you this again. Okay, so let's try another one. So I'll come down here. And as I say, you want a little bit of tension here. You want to keep this flat, and maybe just to slightly angle it up, and I do apologize that I'm left-handed, it might be confusing for some. Slightly angle it up in order to be able to wrap carefully here. So I'm going to do 4 on this one. If you're using embroidery thread, you might want to do 4 or 5 if you've only got 2 or 3 strands. Just to try it out and see what happens. Now, my other part of the technique I will explain is, and this is probably because I'm a nurse, it reminds me of pulling a plunger back on a syringe. So once I've wrapped it, I'm keeping a little bit of tension here in this hand here, not tight, but sort of just keeping it together. I pull back the needle and I go back in the same hole more or less than I've come out. That's the easiest way. Sometimes these are a bit of a devil to get through, especially the thicker you get. As you see, I had more problem with the 4 than I did with the 3. I'm going to do a 5 now just to see if it makes an awful lot of difference, but generally the thicker it is, the harder it is to get through. So I've done 5 here. Again, I'm pulling it back with a little bit of tension this side as well as the tension from pulling it back, and going in as near to possible as to the original location. Yes, that is more difficult. You see, the more thicker you get, the harder it is. So if you're using something like cotton perlé 8 for the first time, you might only want to wrap it 3 times. You might want to just experiment. Different threads can be different. So I'm going to do a 3 again now. I'm pulling it back. I've got a little bit of tension, and yep, that's still even a little bit difficult. I have got a needle with a slightly thicker eye. In fact, it's probably slightly too thick because it's the eye of the needle that is struggling to go through. So if you've got a thin enough piece of thread, you might want to go for a slightly thinner eye. This also is probably not the sharpest one in the world because it's my practice one. So I'm just going to show you that again. So we're coming up there and we're holding it as flat as possible, just lifting it slightly to wrap it. 1, 2, 3, pulling it back and going in. Now sometimes it does unravel before you get there. This is the fiddliness of French knots. But generally, if you use that sort of technique, it does come out okay. So we've got a few there. As you can see, they could look like little buds on the leaves there, and it can be a really effective, especially as I say, when used with a variegated yarn. It can give the appearance that you're changing colour all the time. So that's a really good thing to think about. I think Anchor and DMC, certainly in the UK, do variegated cotton perlé 8. Also, I buy hand-dyed cotton perlé from my local indie dyer. Well, actually, it's in the UK. It's not local, but if you're in the UK, they are called Paint Box Threads, and they are wonderful. We'll do a separate video on that. So as I say, the thicker it is, the more difficult it is. But everyone, I think, tends to struggle with French knots. But once you get the basic premise, is that if you're keeping it flat and low, just lifting it up enough to be able to just wrap it, then you pull back, you go through, and there's your lovely little French knot. Yep, it is getting quite difficult now. I think I need to change my needle. There we go. It's gone through. Something with a slightly sharper point, actually. This is a blunted. It's probably because I use it so much. So that was really all I wanted to show you on the French knots, and I'll get the other bits out just to show you again how they can be used. So here I've got French knots all over this section here. These were done in different colours. This wasn't a variegated, so that was a bit of a labour of love. I've also done it in a slightly different fabric, a different thread here. This is one of those sort of, I don't know if it's rayon, it's very old little bit of thread. It doesn't even have a label, so I can't tell you exactly what it is. But it gives a really, a lot more shiny, as you can see. There's a bit of shine and softness on the cotton poly, but this is really texturally, it's lovely. So, you know, these are the sort of ideas of how you can use it. And again here with different colours, just to match in with the overall look of the piece. And finally, to go back to my practice piece, as you can see here, that's done in a yarn, and that was a bit of a struggle. I do use yarn sometimes because, you know, it does look really nice and does look really different. Some stitches look very different, like the feather stitch here when done in the yarn than done in the cotton perlé. So I like a bit of texture and a little bit of difference. And here's the variegated ones, which you know, gives that nice colour change without you having to change colours every 5 minutes. So I hope that was helpful, and I shall see you again here soon for another video. Do please put into the comments if you've got anything that you'd like to add or ask, and I will see you soon. Thanks very much.